Hi, good morning everybody. Welcome to this week's update in trans equality. My name is Kayla Powell. I'm joined by our policy director, Harper Tobin.
Hi.
We're going to do things a little bit differently this week. Obviously, we're going to let you know, just like we normally do, about some of the big news that happened. You saw in the description above, we're going to talk about a new Department of Labor directive, and we're going to talk about an opportunity that we have to support transgender veterans in getting equal access to health care. But one thing that we noticed was y'all had a lot of questions. What does this mean for me as an employee of the federal government or as a contractor? Or questions about the VA comments that we're asking you to put in. We want to give you an opportunity to ask those questions. So as we go throughout the stream today, we're going to be here for about half an hour. If you want to leave a comment with a question in the comments below, I'll be watching that and we'll try and answer it live on the stream. So, you know, if you have a question, don't hesitate to put it in there. And at this point, I'll hand it off to Harper Jean, who's going to talk about a couple of things.
Sure. Thanks, Kayla. Everybody, I want to talk to you about just a couple of the many things we're watching and working on here at NCTE here in DC. The first thing I want to talk about is the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, which, among many other things, is responsible for providing health care to many eligible veterans. One of the problems that the VA has is that for decades they've had a regulation that the VA themselves made up back in the time when trans people's medical needs weren't well understood, that says that the VA can't provide or pay for a lot of medical care that trans people might need. And that has been a real obstacle for a lot of veterans. It's been a real obstacle for their healthcare providers who can provide them their primary care, preventive tests, hormone prescriptions, mental health care. But if they determine that someone needs a medical procedure to treat gender dysphoria, they can't really recommend and get that care provided to that veteran through the VA, even if that veteran is otherwise eligible to get all the health care they might need through the VA. Well, that's just wrong. And it's a relic of a time, again, when people didn't understand, when the medical science wasn't where it is now on these issues. Well, a lot has changed since then. And the VA, over the last couple of years, has taken a couple of looks at this issue. Back in 2016, we pressed the VA to take a look at this issue, and the VA even publicly acknowledged that surgical treatment for gender dysphoria is widely accepted in the medical field as safe and effective and sometimes necessary for transgender patients. But for some reason, they decided not to move ahead with getting rid of the exclusion. The VA now, in 2018, is asking the public for comment on whether they should get rid of this exclusion, this really outdated rule that keeps veterans from getting the care that they need, or whether they should keep it or whether they should get with the 21st century, get with the consensus in the medical community and get rid of it and just treat veterans the same and give them the care that they need and that they've earned. So this is a really big opportunity for all of us, whether you're a veteran, a military service member, a loved one of somebody who served in the military, whether you're just a trans person or a healthcare provider, or both, or just somebody who believes that nobody should be singled out, no veteran should be singled out and denied the health care that they need. This is a real opportunity for us to weigh in and tell the VA to listen to the science, to listen to trans veterans and their healthcare providers about what they need, and not leave any veteran behind. Now, I know I've gotten asked, we have such an unfriendly administration, why is the VA asking about this now?
It's a good question.
It is a good question. It's a long story, but it's because some trans veterans have challenged this rule. have challenged this rule in court. The court has asked the VA what it's going to do about this issue, and the VA's response is to go to the public and ask whether they should voluntarily get rid of this rule. Congress doesn't need to act. It's not part of any law. It's part of the VA's own rules, and they can change them.
Yes.
So, under pressure of this challenge for veterans, the VA is asking for input, and thousands of folks are already weighing in. This is going to be a real opportunity, like I said, to really press the VA to look at the science, look at the medicine, and look at the care that veterans are entitled to. And hopefully the VA will do the right thing. If it hears overwhelmingly from veterans, from people in healthcare, from people around the country, that this is the right thing to do. If they don't, all these comments we're putting in become part of the record in court.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And you can make a comment. As Harper Jean was saying, you don't have to be a veteran. Obviously we want veterans to put in comments in support of changing this rule, but we also want folks who are friends, family members, allies, trans people, medical providers, anyone who cares about this issue. It's really, really easy to put in a comment. I'm going to put in the comments below this video a link to our VA action page. All you need to do is click that link, fill out a little bit of information. It's going to ask for your name and your email address. And then we've actually provided a template to help you get started. We want you to put your own words to this comment, keeping in mind that it is going to become part of the public record. So it is going to be a public comment. We don't want you to put any sensitive or personal information in there, but we do want you to make this comment your own. And then when you hit submit, we send it on to the VA, and it does become part of that record. So what I'd like to do at this point is we're going to take a couple minutes and ask a couple questions. I'll either answer or Harper Jean will answer. So the first one that we got from Mufasa Mack: do you have a chapter or representation in Denver, Colorado? This is a question that we get fairly frequently. So NCTE is a national policy advocacy organization based here in Washington, D.C. We don't have local representation or local chapters, but there are things that you can do if you want to if you want to help us or help trans rights in your area. You can always donate to us to help support the work that we're doing. If you visit our additional information page on transequality.org, that will also allow you to see additional resources in your area and places that you might be able to volunteer or lend support to. And as always, stay tuned to our social media channels, sign up for our email list, and we'll let you know when there's a way to assist us.
And we work closely on a regular basis with state and local groups around the country, folks like One Colorado, folks like the LGBT community centers around Colorado and around the country. We work with a lot of small and large transgender organizations around the country, folks like the Trans Ohio and the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico, folks in all different parts of the country that are doing their own fantastic work, and are folks that you can connect with to make a difference in your community.
That's right. Another question that we have, I'm worried about trans people's access to healthcare more broadly too. I've heard that the administration is trying to encourage discrimination against us by undermining Obamacare. What's happening there and what can we do about it? This sounds like a question for you, Harper Jean.
Oh yeah, so I'm really glad that you asked. Again, this goes back to the question of healthcare. We really want folks to weigh in on the VA because there's this comment period now between now and September 7th, but obviously we all need healthcare and we all need to be treated equally when it comes to healthcare. The Trump administration is trying to do everything that it can to undermine people's access to healthcare under the ACA and the gains that we've made in the last 8 years. the Trump administration's attacks are more numerous than I could probably go through here. They're trying to encourage states to kick people off of Medicaid in various ways. Some of that's being challenged in court. They're trying to reduce the resources and the time that people can enroll in health insurance for next year. They're in court challenging the pre-existing condition protections, the heart of the ACA. The Trump administration is cooperating with a group of state officials who are trying to, one more time, try to cut the heart out of the ACA. And the Trump administration has said it's not going to defend the ACA in court. They are putting their weight behind a really far-fetched legal argument that I don't have space to get into here unless someone really, really wants to hear about it. And the upshot is that they're trying to take that all the way to the Supreme Court to get rid of pre-existing condition protections. That's why the fight over the Supreme Court and the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh is so important. We have a president who said he would nominate a justice who would overturn the ACA, and that justice would be Brett Kavanaugh. The other thing that, of course, a lot of you all have heard about from us that they're trying to do is reinterpret the non-discrimination laws. And this is something they're doing in employment, in education, in healthcare, in jobs for federal contractors, which we'll get to in a few minutes. They don't get to just change the law. That's for Congress to do. And they don't get to just overturn court decisions that over the last 2 decades have said again and again that our civil rights laws protect transgender people. But what they can do is create a lot of confusion by putting out guidance documents, and court briefs, and memos, and proposed regulations that say, what do you mean trans people are protected? Of course they're not. We interpret the laws, and we disagree. We think trans people aren't protected. Well, you know, when the Obama administration said its interpretation of the law, it was backed up by the courts. The Trump administration, on these issues, they don't have much of a leg to stand on. So what they've been saying is any day now, they're going to drop a proposed regulation that says the ACA's healthcare rights law doesn't protect trans people. Well, that's wrong. And the courts say it's wrong, and we know it's wrong. But the Trump administration's actions have already started to encourage some health insurance companies, some state Medicaid programs, state employee plans to say, oh, we agree with the Trump administration, we're going to start putting trans exclusions back in our health plans. Well, those folks are getting sued. We're going to win, but a lot of folks could have more trouble getting their health care in the meantime. So that's why we have our Protect Trans Health campaign with our partners at Transgender Law Center. You can sign up for updates at protecttranshealth.org. As soon as we see that proposal on the healthcare rights law drop from the administration, we'll let you know, and you can work with us together to weigh in.
Yep.
In the meantime, the biggest thing that we want folks to do to weigh in to protect healthcare for everyone is to speak up for healthcare for trans veterans. Through our website, through, I believe it's bit.ly/VA transhealth, to weigh in before September 7th. And we'll keep you up to date about the broader fight to protect trans health.
Absolutely, and one thing that we'd like to do before we move on to the next question or to another topic is to give a shout out to our friends at the Transgender Law Center who we've partnered with on the Protect Trans Health initiative. They're a really amazing organization that we're working with to kind of make sure that we can not only keep everybody up to date, but effectively fight back against this once it's announced. One of the other questions that we have here, are there any new bills on the horizon to protect trans rights and trans people? So there's a lot of focus always on bills that are at the federal level. we don't have a Congress that's very receptive to trans rights right now. I think that's fair to say. But there have been some really amazing state level victories this year protecting trans rights and trans people. A number of states have passed laws outlawing dangerous and disproven conversion therapy. New Hampshire is among the states that passed laws protecting gender identity as part of their non-discrimination protections. I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting.
We've had important breakthroughs in New Jersey on healthcare and updated birth certificates for trans folks who need them. We're making a lot of progress in the states, sometimes through passing new laws, sometimes through passing new policies to make it easier to update your driver's license, to make it so folks who want to can get a gender neutral marker on their driver's license. And you can go to our ID Doc Center to find out the latest in your state. But we are still working for change at the federal level. We are still working to introduce and build support for laws at the federal level that will help us move forward in the long run. It's really tough in this Congress, and that's why voting in the fall is so important. But we are still working on that. Of course, the landmark LGBT equality bill, the Equality Act, is sort of our flagship bill in Congress that we're continuing to build bipartisan support for. That's going to take some time, but it is a comprehensive updating and clarifying of the civil rights laws so that we don't have to keep fighting these things out in court over and over again, and we will get it passed. We recently worked with Congresswoman Kathleen Rice's office to introduce a bill called the Screening with Dignity Act to try to protect the privacy and dignity of transgender travelers, and really all travelers, when it comes to airport screening. Calling out TSA to do some things that it already should be doing to update its training, procedures, and its outdated technology to stop causing so much humiliation and problems for trans people. Now, are we going to pass that bill in the remaining few months of this Congress? Maybe not, but we are certainly using that as one more platform to keep the pressure on TSA to change. So this is just a couple of examples of ways that we're continuing to try to work with our allies in Congress to do what we can to set out where we want to move forward in the future and build support so that we can move forward in the future. And it does underscore, again, the importance of voting.
Yeah, so in short, yes, there are bills and things out there that are working to advance trans rights. Leo Caldwell says, as always, thank you for keeping us informed. Well, thank you for tuning in and for being a supporter. Why don't we take a moment to talk about the directive from the Department of Labor?
Sure. So the Department of Labor has an office that works to, among other things, protect the rights of a specific group of employees, a rather large number of people in the U.S. economy who work for companies that have contracts with the federal government to do all sorts of things, to handle call centers, to design and manage websites for the government, to do construction, to help run government programs. Federal contractors do all sorts of work around the country and around the world. And they have specific protections under laws and executive orders that go back decades. And now, as we've said before, as we keep saying, because apparently we have to keep saying it, all workers in this country just about are protected by our federal civil rights laws that protect trans people. Federal contractors, like federal employees, have especially clear and explicit protections through an executive order that was updated by President Obama in 2014 to say, in the most clear possible terms, that you can't discriminate in federal contracting based on gender identity or sexual orientation. So that has been interpreted for the courts, for everybody in the workplace. For federal contractors, it's in the black and white of an executive order that governs all federal contractors. And that's been very clear in the law for several years now. There is no question, or shouldn't be, that these workers are protected. Along comes this directive this past Friday, and what it says is, well, we're taking another look at religious exemptions under this executive order for federal contractors who may believe that their religious liberty is infringed by these non-discrimination protections. Well, we're big believers in religious freedom here at NCTE, but we don't think the purpose of it is to fire people because of who they are. Right. Especially not when you're serving the public, working for the federal government with taxpayer funds. The federal law does have a narrow exemption for federal contractors that are religious organizations that want to prefer hiring members of their own religion. So if you are a Jewish organization, you could decide that you want to prefer hiring people who share your Jewish faith. But what you can't do is say that because of your religion, you get to discriminate based on race, national origin, gender, sexual orientation. You don't get to do that. And in fact, the executive order of the law says that very clearly. Nevertheless, this Department of Labor directive, it's very broad and very vague, but it basically says the Supreme Court has said religious freedom is really important. We're taking another look at this whole set of issues. We're going to be issuing rules in the months to come. And in the meantime, we want federal contractors and the people in our office who review claims of discrimination to really bend over backwards to make sure they're not infringing anybody's religious beliefs. Well, that sounds fine, except that when they did this, they went into their own rules and policies and frequently asked questions and deleted sections on their website that said religious exemptions don't give you a pass to discriminate based on other personal characteristics. That sounds a lot like they're up to no good and trying to carve out a license to discriminate against LGBT people. So if folks are asking what does this mean, it's saying this is confusing, that's because it is. Again, this is part of the Trump administration strategy to sow confusion about what the law is, who it does and doesn't protect, and to encourage people who want to push the envelope with discrimination against LGBT people. So we may see that in the months to come. We're going to be closely watching what the Labor Department does in this area. But if you work for a company that works for the federal government, what you should know is that the law has not changed and that you are protected from anti-LGBT discrimination or other kinds of illegal discrimination based on race or gender or other protected characteristics. The law hasn't changed. We have Know Your Rights resources on our website for federal contractors, federal employees, and for people who work any kind of job about your rights and how, if you've been discriminated against, you still have a right to file a complaint with the EEOC, or if your company's a federal contractor, with the Department of Labor's Civil Rights Office. They have a responsibility to process these complaints, investigate claims of discrimination, and if they can't resolve them, workers may be able to go to court. So none of that has changed. It's just a lot of Trump administration noise trying to create confusion and encourage bad actors.
So I think we have time for one more question, one more comment, and it is, can you talk a little bit about how the Supreme Court nomination affects trans folks?
Oh gosh, how doesn't it? The Supreme Court makes decisions that affect all of our lives. It's hard to think of things that are more important for trans people than the stuff we've been discussing. The jobs and the ability to keep your job and not be fired because of who you are, and your health care, the ability to get health care and not be turned away because of who you are. Well, unfortunately, both of those things could be, and a lot more, could be at stake in the Supreme Court in the coming year or 2 or 3 years. Right now, there's a case that the anti-transgender group ADF has asked the Supreme Court to take. They're asking the Supreme Court to rule that employers are free to fire transgender people, to overturn dozens of court rulings for the last couple decades saying that trans people are protected in the workplace. This is a case involving a transgender woman who was a funeral director in Michigan for 6 years. She was good at her job, and nobody said otherwise until she came out as a trans woman. And then her employer, this chain of funeral homes, fired her, saying that they didn't want to employ an open transgender woman and thought it would make their customers uncomfortable. Well, that's against the law, and the federal court said so. But ADF wants the Supreme Court to overturn that ruling and all the other rulings that have protected transgender workers. Now, this should be an easy case for the Supreme Court to reject. But with a new justice coming in who could tip the balance against equality, we don't know what can happen. The Trump White House has nominated Judge Brett Kavanaugh for this lifetime post, and we still don't know a lot about his time in politics in the Bush White House, where a lot of anti-LGBT stuff went on that he might have been involved in, and we just don't know because the public records aren't being released. Mm-hmm. But we do know that he's consistently ruled against workers claiming discrimination, mm-hmm. And we do know that anti-LGBT groups are working hard and spending money to get him on that court for life. We also know, like I said before, President Trump has promised to nominate someone on the court who would overturn the ACA, mm-hmm. who would bring back pre-existing condition bans. And that nominee is Brett Kavanaugh. That challenge to the ACA could be coming to the Supreme Court in the next year or two to overturn pre-existing condition protections. All those cases under the healthcare rights law that are in the courts right now, cases from California and Wisconsin, around the country that have said that trans people can't be denied healthcare or insurance because they're transgender, those could find their way to the court too, to a judge who President Trump has promised would rule to take healthcare away from people. So that's scary stuff, but it's not a foregone conclusion, and you can weigh in with your senators, unless you live in DC. But that's another issue.
Yes.
For those of you who have senators, call them if you got them. Mm-hmm. Our action alert you can find up at transequality.org. And in the coming weeks, leading up to the hearings and potential vote on the Kavanaugh nomination, is the time to be weighing in, no matter what state you're in, with your senators and making your voice heard. Remember, Justice Kennedy, who recently left the court, he was the third nominee for the seat that he filled for 3 decades. That was because a more extreme nominee got defeated, mm-hmm. and another extreme nominee got defeated. And Justice Kennedy sometimes was for equality and sometimes wasn't, but he was a darn sight better than the guys who were nominated before him. That's what we're trying to do here. So, a president is for a few years, the Supreme Court is forever. Mm-hmm. So, in addition to weighing in for healthcare and trans veterans, we encourage all of you who have U.S. senators to give them a call.
So, there's one more comment that I want to take, and I think it's a good one to close on. Paula Stephanie Cromer asks, so with all of the bad news as of lately, what can we do about it? So, number one, as Harper Jean just said, call your senators. You have 2, unless you live in D.C. Call both of them and let them know that you're opposed to Brett Kavanaugh and let them know why. Call them, email them. Check out Indivisible's website. They oftentimes have opportunities for you to go to their offices and let them know. Additionally, other things that you can do on the other things that are happening for Protect Trans Health, for the Affordable Care Act non-discrimination, you can go to protecttranshealth.org and sign up for updates. There's no specific action there, but we want you to be able to mobilize quickly when this happens. We need your help to do that. So go to protecttranshealth.org, put in your email address, and we will let you know as soon as there is something that you can do on that. And then also with the, we can't forget the VA. We want you to go leave a public comment on that. So that's 3 things that you can do in the next probably hour to really do your part and make a difference in favor of trans people and trans rights around the country. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. If you asked a question, left a comment, and we didn't get to it, we'll try and go back in and answer those questions separately. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Harper Jean, for providing all your expertise here, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.